I lifted the can of Red Bull to my mouth for the third time. I knew that it was empty, but sometimes you can get a few extra drops if you give it a good shake. Not this time. I cursed and threw it into my back seat. I turned my attention back to the dark desert highway. The road trip from where I went to college back to my parents' house is a long and lonely journey through rural Utah. I had been driving for almost 9 hours, and it must have been an hour since I had last seen another car. It was nearing midnight and I was fighting to hold up my eyelids. I passed by the silhouettes of mountains that framed the road on either side. When a gas station appeared off in the distance, I breathed a sigh of relief. It looked a little out of place, a single building all alone in the middle of the desert. It sported a single, double-sided pump underneath the classic flat overhang. The station's parking lot was completely empty. I pulled into a spot, stepped outside and stretched. The night air was surprisingly cold and windy. I shivered, but continued to stretch out my legs. Just standing up after all those hours felt amazing. I sighed before reaching into my car and grabbing my wallet. Another energy drink. That's all that I needed to get through the last few hours of my drive. I pushed through the glass doors of the gas station and paused. Something inside was off. Have you ever been inside an empty school at night? Maybe an abandoned mall? There's a feeling that you get when you're walking through an empty place that's normally full of people. It's hard for me to describe it, but that's what I felt in that gas station. The fluorescent lights overhead gave an incessant buzz, and what sounded like an ice machine in the back made the occasional grinding sound. But other than that, the place was completely quiet. There was no cashier behind the counter, no other customers, nothing. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded incredibly loud in my ears, but there was no response. I shot a look through the glass doors at the empty parking lot. A wave of goosebumps swept over my body. I wasn't scared, so my reaction confused me. I walked through the store to the bathrooms in the back where I used the urinal and I washed my hands. I walked towards the air dryer, but decided to use a paper towel instead. Making all that noise seemed wrong somehow. As I stepped out of the bathroom, I saw a motion out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head, but I couldn't see anything. I walked in that direction, and then I paused. A hallway extending for 30 or so feet straight away from me. I was fairly sure that this gas station was not large enough to contain a 30-foot-long hallway. "Hello?" I called out again. The hallway extended straight back, white walls and gray tiles all lit up by the buzzing fluorescent lights. I turned back towards the front of the gas station for a moment, and then turned and started walking down the hallway. I passed several doors but didn't try any of the handles. At the end, the hallway ended in the middle of another hallway. Goosebumps broke out over my body as I looked to my right and left. The new hallway extended for at least another 40 feet in either direction. "No way," I said, my whispered voice breaking the silence. I shook my head trying to wake up. Like I said, I had been driving for 9 hours. I must have just missed a larger building built behind the gas station. I turned right and continued down the hallway, then turned left at the end of that hallway where another long corridor extended. The hallway opened to a small room on my left. A plaque on the wall read, "Arcade." I walked inside. The room was fairly large but contained just a single game. A thick dusty cord connected the machine to a nearby outlet. I walked up to the machine. It looked to be from the mid-'80s and bore a control system that consisted of just a single stick and a start button. The title of the machine read, Maze Escape. I didn't have a quarter, but it looked like whoever had been there before had already entered one. I grabbed the stick and hit start. The game was a top-down maze scroller similar to Pac-Man. I controlled a small character wearing an 8-bit suit and tie as he navigated a maze consisting of a series of white walls. At first, I didn't understand the game. I could only see a small radius around my character, so the maze was hard to navigate. And then I turned a corner and saw another figure. As he entered my circle of vision, the game switched away from the top-down perspective, instead entering a mini cutscene where it drew a pixel art version of this new figure line by line across the screen. The figure was a massive man wearing a bloody butcher's apron. He had a disgusted expression and held an oversized fish hook in his left hand. A text box appeared beneath him. "Cough, cough, disgusting," he said. "Your germs are in my shop." The game flashed back to the top-down perspective. The butcher began chasing after my character. I turned and ran through the maze, trying to remember where the dead ends were at. The butcher continued to cough, a horrible low-quality sound that screeched out of the speakers. I turned a corner, but I found myself in a dead end. The butcher approached, and the speakers now emitted a horrible, crunchy laughing sound. When the butcher reached my character, the screen flashed again, now drawing another pixel art line by line. The art was of my character's head, with a twisted expression of horror and suspended by a hook through one of his eyes. It was disgusting. I stepped back from the controls, the goosebumps rippling across my skin once again. I turned back to the hallway to get the heck out of whatever this place was, and then I froze at a sound from further down the hallway. It was a man coughing loudly, coming from just around the corner. I froze, listening. When the footsteps began, I turned and ran for the front. I turned right and then left, the entire time listening to as the footsteps and coughing of something behind me grew closer. Suddenly, I was back at the gas station. I burst through the shelves, shoved open the front door, and jumped into my car. What I could see of the gas station was empty, exactly how it had been when I had first walked through it. I turned my engine over and spun out of the parking lot, not stopping until I reached my parents' place a few hours later. I spent the next few days of my break just thinking about the place. I managed to convince my brother to drive back and check it out with me while the sun was still up. We got there after a few hours of driving, and I found it easily enough, but the place was completely abandoned. It was also extremely small, far too small for me to make sense. I kept telling myself that I must have been having a fatigue-induced hallucination, but I don't know.